Hi, this is Mrs. Diacono, and today we're going to talk about exercise markers. First, the aerobic exercise markers. There are three: the aerobic threshold, which is abbreviated AET. The second is the first lactate threshold, LT1, and the next is ventilatory threshold, or VT1. Those are the aerobic exercise markers. Aerobic threshold is the beginning of aerobic metabolism, or basically the least amount of work that your client needs to do to cause them to get any better fit aerobically. The first lactate threshold is the first noticeable rise in lactate levels, and this is measured by metabolic blood gases. And usually you'll see an increase of 1 millimole per liter increase above the resting value. Of course, you're not going to measure this in the gym as a trainer. This is something they would do as an exercise physiologist or an exercise technician at the hospital or in a lab that does these tests. The ventilatory threshold is the first rise in oxygen uptake, or when your client notices that they're starting to breathe a little heavier. So what does that mean to a personal trainer? These are the three markers of the body beginning to use more glycogen than fatty acids to cause the muscles to work. You need to know that it's dynamic and trainable in your clients. So if you want them to have better aerobic fitness, then you need to train at or above that threshold. So the trainer's note, that's where the talk test comes in, because due to the increased demand of oxygen, the exerciser is going to feel the first signs of change in respiratory rate, aka they start breathing heavier. So to the personal trainer, VT1 as measured by the talk test means an increase in the need for oxygen without exhaling increased carbon dioxide. So now let's move to the anaerobic exercise markers. There's three again: the anaerobic threshold, or AT, second lactate threshold, LT2, and second ventilatory threshold, VT2. Those are the anaerobic exercise markers. So anaerobic threshold is the beginning of anaerobic metabolism, or the amount of work necessary to produce anaerobic fitness. Basically, it means the beginning of the end of your workout. The second lactate threshold is the second noticeable spike, or OBLA, onset of blood lactate accumulation. When you're marking this in the lab, you're going to see about 3 millimoles of liter more of an increase in blood concentration of lactate than you would resting. Again, you're not going to see this as a trainer in the gym. Second ventilatory threshold is the second rise in oxygen uptake. This time there's another increased need for oxygen, but there's also more carbon dioxide being blown off or exhaled. This happens because carbon dioxide is used as a buffering agent. It keeps the body out of respiratory acidosis. Respiratory acidosis is something we'll talk about in a different lesson, but definitely something you should understand, especially in light of some of your special populations clients. So I like to call this steady state because it accurately describes the balanced position of the removal of lactic acid versus its accumulation. At the steady state, you can have your client exercise at that level, that intensity, for a long time. And if you improve this, like I said, these can be improved with training. That's a great sign of positive training adaptations. So what does all this mean to a personal trainer? Well, your lactate threshold 2 and your ventilatory threshold 2 mark the maximum intensity that can be sustained. So as a trainer, there's no need for a lab to figure out the client's levels. It's easily assessed by the way it feels. What that means is that your client's going to know when they're working as hard as they can sustain their maximal effort. They'll also know the point at which they can't sustain that intensity level. They'll start slowing down, or their muscles will get so fatigued and so painful that they can't sustain that. So, how do you use this information in the gym? Well, training below this intensity is going to improve their aerobic fitness. This is what most clients want. Training above this intensity is going to develop anaerobic fitness. You might want to think about this for clients who are athletes. Training right at the intensity improves the exerciser's threshold, and by improving that threshold, the client will be able to work at a higher intensity while delaying fatigue, as well as get less accumulation of lactic acid in the muscles. All right, well, I have some examples I'd like for you to watch. This one's on breathing, blood gases, and anaerobic threshold.
So on this chart, you're looking over here on the left-hand side. Let's look right here where the cursor is going. And this is a marker of ventilation or respirations, breaths per minute. Down here on the bottom, it lists neurological phase, which means basically at the start of exercise, when your breathing increases in excess of what the body needs. The metabolic phase, in which your breathing pretty much keeps up with the amount of oxygen that your body needs, and then the compensatory phase, which your body really has to work to blow off those additional gases and produce those additional items that your body needs. Over here is, if you look at the cursor again, this is the threshold between aerobic and anaerobic activity, or the anaerobic threshold. And then if you look over here at these values right here, you're looking at the oxygen pressure, carbon dioxide pressure, pH of the blood, lactic acid levels, carbon dioxide, and the oxygen volume. All right, and each of these are right now at resting rate. And as we have our exerciser start to exercise, you will see. So right now at rest, the pH is at 7.4, and the lactic acid is pretty much non-existent. There's more oxygen volume than there is carbon dioxide volume. And if you see, as the guy starts to exercise, right here he's crossing into the aerobic threshold, and you'll notice that the pH is still around 7.4, but both the carbon dioxide and the oxygen values have increased. If the guy starts exercising more intensely, heavier, you can look over here on the right. You can see those values continue to increase. Kind of proportionally, the carbon dioxide starting to catch up with the oxygen, and then boom, right here when we hit the anaerobic threshold, they are equal. As soon as we cross over that threshold, the carbon dioxide inches above the oxygen, the lactic acid levels start to increase, and the pH starts to decrease, putting that body in an acidic state. Hi, this is Mrs. Diacano, and we're going to go over a diagram that shows the diffusion directions for hydrogen, ions, carbon dioxide, and oxygen between the blood and the muscle cells during exercise. The resulting concentration changes affect the buffer equilibrium, shown over here in the upper right-hand corner of the diagram in yellow. So let me just kind of review the steps that affect the buffers in the blood during exercise. First of all, the hemoglobin carries the oxygen from the lungs to the muscles through the blood. The muscles are going to need more oxygen than normal because of their metabolic activity is increased during exercise, and then the amount of oxygen in the muscle is decreased, setting up that concentration gradient that we talked about in earlier modules between the muscle cells and the blood and the capillaries. So oxygen diffuses from the blood to the muscles on this concentration gradient. So the muscles produce carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions as a result of increased metabolism, setting up concentration gradient in the opposite direction from that oxygen gradient. The next thing is the carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions flow from the muscles to the blood via these concentration gradients that we just talked about. The buffering action of the hemoglobin picks up the extra hydrogen ion and some carbon dioxide. If the amounts of those hydrogen ions and carbon dioxide are more than the capacity of hemoglobin, they're going to affect the carbonic acid equilibrium, and this is going to lower the pH of the blood, causing acidosis, which we talked about in a separate module. So the lungs and the kidneys respond to the pH changes by blowing off carbon dioxide, bicarbonate, and hydrogen ions from the blood. So the body has developed this finely tuned process based on the buffering of the bicarbonate and the carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion acid-base equilibrium that handle the changes that exercise produces. All right, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, adiacano@pcitraining.edu. Thanks.
What are you doing up here? I thought you were downstairs boxing chocolates.
Oh, they kicked me out of there fast.
Why?
I kept pinching them to see what kind they were. This is the 4th department I've been in.
Oh, I didn't do so well either.
No.
All right, girls. Now, this is your last chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello!
Oh, this is easier.
Yeah, we can handle this okay.
Listen, Ethel, I think we're fighting a losing game. Here she comes.
Fine, you're doing splendidly.